Your Redneck Workshop. I'm Harold, and we're here today to finish up making a tailstock for my rotary table, and we're making a tailstock for the rotary table so I can make a gear. Of course, we still got to make an arbor to hold the gears in the Grizzly with. So this is a project that goes to a project that goes to a project, just like Pierre said. And I'm watching you, Pierre. I see what you're doing there. Stop fidgeting around, okay? All right. Anyway, being a poor old dumb redneck, I come across a lot of things that confuse me. And how I got into this confusion was I went to the Steel Challenge this Sunday, and then I helped tear everything down. And they had this little trailer they were hauling everything around on. There was a board there to sit on, and I sat on it. And after I got through with all that, I discovered I had been sitting in a blob of white paint that had leaked out of a couple of cans. And so there I had white paint on the bottom of my britches. And I managed to keep from, sticking to the truck seat by putting a bunch of paper towels in it. And I come home, and then I washed the pants out with gasoline, and the boss lady threw the gasoline in the washing machine, the pants with the gasoline on them, and then now the washing machine smells like gasoline. I don't have any paint in my pants, but they're hanging on a tree in the backyard because they stink too bad. So I go looking on the internet. This is finally the end of the stupid story, but I go looking on the internet to find out what to do about it, and I find this website. I think it's Hints from Heloise or something, some helpful person. And they say to put in 2 cups of vinegar and a cup of baking soda and into your wash machine and wash it like that. If it doesn't work the first time, do it again. So I'm halfway through that process now, but being a poor dumb old redneck, this confuses me because this is one of those situations where people are always bringing 2 chemical opposites together. Everybody knows that vinegar is an acid, baking soda is a basic chemical. You put a little vinegar in a glass there and throw in a spoonful of baking soda, and you'll just see it fizz like crazy while they neutralize each other. And I personally am just of the opinion that you don't have vinegar or baking soda when you get through. All you got is just the salts that are left over. And I'm not sure, is that the point? They want to make these salts, and these salts are what's going to neutralize the gasoline? Life is sure confusing when you're a poor old dumb redneck. That's all I can say. Anyway, let's get on and finish up this tailstock so we can get on to the next thing. Alright, I got the hole started. I'll run in with a pilot drill first, and then I'll go in with the tap drill. I'm going to do a half 20, so we'll see what we get. Alright, let's take this guy out of here. Here we go. I'm hoping my plans to tap this hole will work out. Alright, now comes the rough time. I'll have to find some tool to make that tap go all the way through there. And So we'll continue on that in just a second. There won't be any power tapping here. We're just going to run her down there and crank the pulley around and see if that'll get it started fairly good and straight. Going in the hole anyway. All right. All right, I believe that started straight, so I'll get my little center, drill aligner, a tap alignment tool, and put on there, and we'll really crank her on down into there. All right, we'll use a redneck tap handle. I think it'll do the job. Not much trash in it. Okay, I'm going to move it around in the vise where I can reach it easier, and I'll bring you guys back later. It's painted and degreased, and now it's going to get, I say it's painted, it's degreased and threaded, and it's going to get painted. There, get my tang untangled and I can talk maybe, but that's the next step. I'll paint it and then get on to making the little screw that's going to go through the middle of it to serve as the center. I'm going to single point the thread to the center, so I'm going to throw to the center. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a test nut so that I can double check against a good thread when I'm cutting. All right, I drilled my test nut, and now I'm threading the little booger. Little dirt and threads maybe. I'll chamfer it, and we'll be through with that. I think the paint on this thing's come out really nice. I was going to powder coat it, and I was getting prepared for it, but I didn't readily find some powder coat, green powder coat that I could get fast enough. And the little booger appeared to be way too big for my oven, so I went ahead and sprayed it with the regular spray paint. I did put some on the bottom, which is not advisable if you want accuracy, and I'll have to sand that back off of there. I put it on there just to fill up the voids. You can see the little voids there that were caused by the shrinkage, and really I just wanted to fill them up. I'll clean off my drill press table, put a piece of emery on there, and I'll sand it all off but it's a little bit wet still for some reason. I guess because the humidity is 90+%, and even in here with the air conditioner going, it's not knocking down the humidity at the rate it normally does, because I guess basically the compressor doesn't have to stay on very often now that we've got down in the 70s. And last night, of course, it was down in the 60s. So I suppose that's, left the paint a little bit wet, but that's not any big deal. I've got plenty of time to let it dry for a week or so if need be. I've got to make the little screw to go in there, and then this will be finished. And that's what today's all about. We're gonna finish that. I made my little test nut here so that I know that the thread's really good and nice and tight. And I realized that the ones you see online, that some of those, they have a slot here, and it's adjustable up and down, the part that holds the the little center. And if this proves to be inaccurate or cause me any kind of accuracy problems, I know if it's a little short, a couple thousand short, I can put a couple of shims under it. If it's a little tall, I can put shims under the rotary table. And if it really gets to be necessary, I've still got plenty of metal there to use, to cut a slot in it and make it infinitely adjustable. Now this three-jaw chuck's got a total indicator run out of 6 thousandths, and I think that, I think I'm going to be able to make this whole thing in there. I probably ought to go back and look at, no, I think the clearances are enough, the allowance is enough. I anticipate making this whole thing in this chuck without removing it, other than just cutting center on a real small center in it, and then I'm going to move it, and then it won't be moved again from that point. So I anticipate that I can thread it, put a little almost point on it and that sort of thing without pulling it out of there. We'll see what happens. Who knows? It might not work out, and then again it might. I would have been smarter to have faced off the end before I did that, but what the hey, we're going to get there. Alright, the end's faced off. So, take this guy and pull him out here. Well, I've got plenty of room for threading. And we'll put a center in the tailstock. I think this little guy here might be just right for the job. And I'm going to play around with seeing how close that I can get to the major diameter here, and I'll show you when I find out. Alright, I appear to have the same diameter from end to end. I had to move the tailstock a little, and I've cut a little 60-degree angle on it there, and now I'm just going to thread it 20 threads per inch, and I've already made the little scratch pass, and it compares favorably to the threading gauge, and I'm just going to feed this straight in. There's no fancy angles or anything. We're going to do it the way I worked out the other day and just see if it doesn't work right. And if I mess it up, I'll turn the rod around and thread the other end. What the heck, okay? Here we go. I think. Well, okay, we're getting really close now to the end of the whole thing. I'm going to make a spring pass, and then I'm going to check it. Let's give her a check here with my homemade gauge. It's a little bit tight, but it screws on. It's possible I may want to just stay right there with that, because I want it to fit nice and tight. So let's call it quits there, and we'll part the little booger off, and then we'll make a nut for it and a knob to, a handle to turn it with, and then we'll be finished. All right, knurling time. All right, we got the knurl done, so we're going to drill it, tap it, and then we'll be pretty much through the whole project, I guess, except for cleaning off the paint off the bottom. Alright, so I guess I'm going to have to part the things off separate, because one's going to be threaded and one's not. So I probably should have thought of that before I got started there, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and part the thing off, I guess. I'll get back to you. Alright, this knob is a press fit on there, and I think it's tight enough that not going anywhere at all. This lock nut, of course, is not a press fit. It's free to turn on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to screw this little guy in. And this will be our center for holding, say, an arbor or whatever, or a mandrel, I guess I should say, for holding a mandrel that you could put a gear blank on for cutting gears. Now this is good and tight in this screw here, which I'm glad of, but I wanted it tight. I don't want it wobbling around. It may be tight enough that the lock nut's not really necessary, but then again, while this thing's new, it's going to be a lot tighter than after it's been run back and forth through there a few times, you know. So go ahead and screw her on. I'll put a little oil on it and then come right back. Alright, the paint's still kind of wet, so I'm not going to tighten the nut down against the paint. I've already got a little spot there where my finger stuck to it. But the way it's going to work is it's got a screw up there that's just exactly where it needs to be. And if I need it locked down, I can lock it down with this nut here. I'm screwing it up against there. And I think that should do the job. All I have to do, which will be later off camera when the paint really gets dried, is sand off the paint off of the bottom there. Now I may put a little touch right there where I got my finger in it and it's stuck. But this part of the project's done. Now the next project will be to make an arbor for the gear cutters. Then the next project after that will be to cut a gear or two. We'll see how many. So maybe a Bubba joke follows this and maybe not. We just have to wait and see. One of the evil polluting chemical plants I worked in was a particular kind of process that it'd run a little over a year and then they'd shut it down and fix everything. In the first 4 or 5 months after it'd been shut down, it'd just run smooth as silk. You might have an hour of dead time between, you know, going out and catching samples and making adjustments and things like that. It was just, you know, like a total retirement home there for the first, you know, half of the year. And then as it went on into the back end of the year, you'd get increasingly busy because there'd be leaks and crises. And, you know, in fact, an operator's job is kind of like long periods of boredom, you know, sort of interspersed with periods of panic and and all-out crisis, you know. So anyway, I was sitting there in the control room. It was graveyard shift, and I was feeling a little bored. And so I looked through the company phone book, and there was one brand new unit way down the road from us there. And so I called down to the shift supervisor's office. That was the number I came across in the phone book. And when he answered it, I gave him one of those Bronx cheers, you know. And the man was totally incensed. He cussed me up one side and down the other. I learned some new words, you know. And I hung it up. Well, I was working with this guy that was kind of like a big old kid. We'll call him Mr. D. And I told Mr. D about it. Well, now Mr. D had a big old body, but out like that, he couldn't see his toes, you know, not standing up. And he was just a happy kind of guy. He was, yeah, I really liked Mr. D. But anyway, he got the number from me. He'd come in, sit down there between his samples or whatever, and he'd dial that number, and that guy'd answer, and he'd go, and the guy would cuss him out something awful. When the guy started running down, Mr. D go, hang up the phone. And then he'd sit there and his belly would just bounce up and down and the tears would just run down his cheek. And Mr. D did that all night long. And there you go. I remember one other time Mr. D, him and one of the security guards didn't get along too good. They were polar opposites. And so Mr. D had a thought there that he knew just what he was going to do, that security guard, because we had to go through the gate and punch the time clock leaving. And we had this little break room, you know, with the usual coffee pot and everything. He got a couple of grocery sacks. This is back in the day when you got your groceries in, you know, in brown paper bags. He double bagged this thing here and threw a little plastic down in the bottom, and he'd dump all the grounds out of the coffee pot in it during the night, and people's lunch scraps, he'd throw them in there out of the garbage can and stuff. And when he got up there close to shift change, he got a paper towel, you know, and put it over the phone. He called the gate, told that guard, "You better watch Mr. D this morning. He's taking something out." And oh, you know, that guard, he was just all happy as he could be, because he was going to catch Mr. D doing something, you know, catch him stealing and get him run off or something, you know. So when Mr. D got up to the gate, he had that sack with some newspapers folded up and covering the top, you know, so you couldn't see what was in it. He went in there about to punch his card. That guard says, "No," he says, "Mr. D," he says, "come on in here." He says, in the office, he says, "I've called the union steward, and he says, just dump that sack out here on the desk." Mr. D says, "No," he says, "I ain't going to do it. This is mine." And so they argued a little bit, you know, and the guard says, "You might as well go and," you know, he says, "you're going to have to dump it out when the steward gets here anyway." So Mr. D looks at him and says, "Oh, all right, if you want it, you can have it." He just dumped all that garbage on his desk and turned around, punched his clock, and went on out. And that guard just standing there looking at this mess on his desk. He knew he'd been suckered, you know. So that's life in the evil polluting chemical plant. Well, that's all, folks. Y'all try to subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Leave a comment if you got something to say. And above all, remember, keep on keeping on. Bye now. Daisy dog, I think you're mad at me. Are you mad at me? Why are you mad at me? What? Tell me. Why? Because I left. I had to go to the range. You wanted to go too. Dogs can't go to the range. What? You gonna bite the guys in charge for that rule? Well, all right. I tell you what. Well, we'll go somewhere else. But dogs can't go to the range. No, Zeke. I know Zeke. Zeke is different. He goes. They got a range in the backyard. All right. Well, I'll think about it. All right.